Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
Welcome to the Bartholomew Town Podcast, WPRO Debate Series. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Today we kick off our series with the Democratic primary for Lieutenant Governor, welcoming 2 of 3 candidates seeking the office. 7-term State Representative Deb Ruggiero and 1st-term State Senator Cynthia Mendes. Through a spokesperson, incumbent Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos declined our invitation to debate, though we've left an empty chair and a microphone available for her in the event that she and her campaign have a last-second change of heart. As the candidates know, today's format will seek to provide equal and ample time for each candidate to expand on their answers and engage in a back and forth, though there are no strict rules for time, other than the debate is scheduled to last no more than 1 commercial-free hour. Let's begin with 60-second introductions. A coin toss decided that Senator Mendes will be the first to offer introductions, so Senator Mendes.
Thank you, Bill. I'm really honored to be here, and thank you, Rep, for joining and honoring this process of debating each other, which I think is really important for our voters to hear where we stand.
Absolutely.
So, as a single mom and a former healthcare worker, I've worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. I never planned to run for office. In my healthcare job, I remember sitting across from mothers like me, trying to offer them healthcare treatment that they needed and watch them turn down this treatment that they needed for themselves because they would have to choose between healthcare, the cost of healthcare, their deductible, and keeping a roof over their family's head or food on the table. I've watched the collection can circle the soccer field when I took my daughter to soccer and watch people, community members, look out for each other and take care of each other. And when I decided to run for office, it was for that reason. It was because I didn't think the people in the State House were actively fighting and protecting our community the way I knew community members were. And when I got to the State House, I saw that to be true. I watched lobbyists kill bills. I watched really, really fundamental pieces of legislation die. And I continue to watch, in the height of COVID, healthcare workers, moms, and working class people in Rhode Islanders suffer without any real meaningful relief or help, including in the middle of a housing crisis. So I'm running for lieutenant governor with Matt Brown, who's running for governor. And we're also running alongside a diverse slate of candidates. We're running on the same principles that no one should go bankrupt or lose their home because they can't afford health care. We're running alongside of nurses and teachers, activists and waitresses, and social workers. We believe in a $19 minimum wage. We believe in a Green New Deal. We believe in Medicare for all. And we also believe that the wealthiest Rhode Islanders, the ones in the top 1%, should pay their fair share. And that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor, because I believe that we're going to do this. The way that we're going to fix things is the way that Rhode Islanders do things, together and looking out for each other.
Thank you, Senator. Rep.
Thank you, Bill, so much for having this forum, and thank you, Senator, for joining us. I'm disappointed a way that Lieutenant Governor is missing in action. It's really disappointing that she won't debate, saying that she's too busy to talk to the voters.
I agree.
As a lieutenant governor, I will make this one of my priorities, talking to you. Deb Ruggiero will be the most active, visible lieutenant governor that this state has ever seen, putting that independent office to work. So I believe my 14 years in the legislature, it's a proven record for putting ideas into action. I've co-sponsored the Reproductive Privacy Act, which protects women's right to reproductive choice, very important right now. Tax credit for seniors has been something I've worked on over my tenure. All of my work on renewable energy, championing and being the sponsor of many of the state's renewable energy laws, to broadband access, expanding digital literacy for residents and for seniors. The Lieutenant Governor's office has 3 statutory responsibilities: Small Business Advisory Council, Emergency Management, and also the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. That's really important because it sets policy for our seniors. And we have not seen any policy or legislation come out of that in a decade. So my vision for the office of Lieutenant Governor is to be a bridge between the governor's office and the state legislature and actually put that office to work. You know, I see it almost as an ombudsman. You listen to people, you convene stakeholders, and then you solve the problems. It's what I've done for the last 14 years, and it's what I hope to do as the next Lieutenant Governor.
And thank you very much, each of you. So beginning our questions here, the Lieutenant Governor of Rhode Island is in many ways an entrepreneurial role, though there are some explicit duties which you just laid out, Rep, primarily serving as governor and waiting in the event that the governor is unable to serve. Much of the work of previous lieutenant governors has been developed from a self-starter perspective, beginning with Rep. Ruggiero. As lieutenant governor, what are the key issues and roles that you would seek to engage in should you be elected lieutenant governor?
Absolutely. Well, as I said, I'm a small businesswoman myself. I've run TV stations, obviously some sales manager of some radio stations, including ones in this building. So I understand the business community, and I also understand what people need. I talked about the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. I intend to really start working on that because we don't have any aging policy in our state. We have to look at rebalancing our Medicaid. We are 42nd in the nation when it comes to at-home care, and many of our parents, grandparents want to age in place at home. So certainly making sure we have policy for small business. I also believe that we need to do way more for our aging population, and that's one of the things that I certainly look forward to doing. And I think, too, the work I've done over the last 14 years, my 4 E's, education, economy, environment, and elderly, really code well with the responsibilities of this office. We just need to do something and put it to work.
Same question, Senator Mendes.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have your finger on the pulse of what Rhode Islanders are experiencing right now. I've prided myself in doing that well before I got into politics, and am very proud to say that I did that as a senator. And one of the things that has emerged is that there's no one single problem that working class people in Rhode Island are facing. We are in the middle of a matrix of multiple issues that are really falling heavy on the shoulders of Rhode Islanders right now. We are in the middle of a housing crisis. We have a little to nothing housing stock. Rent and mortgages are through the roof. We have wages have not increased to match inflation, and healthcare is our healthcare workers are struggling. People are struggling to afford healthcare, and our aging population as well is tremendously struggling. And there are some necessary pieces of legislation. There are necessary things that we need to see happen, and it's embarrassing to say they could have already happened if we had the leadership to be able to see them to come to fruition. For example, we have witnessed multiple Medicaid cuts for years. And it's actually appalling that is something that's whenever the state is trying to level their budget, the most vulnerable get on the chopping block first. And then we see leadership turn around and give big tax giveaways to the wealthiest. So what I think needs to happen is and by the way, our Medicaid reimbursement rates haven't been increased since 1992. I was 12 years old. And so there's really no excuse for that. And so we need to increase our Medicaid reimbursement rates. We need to address the housing crisis in meaningful ways. That means building 10,000 green affordable housing, as well as removing the ban on multiple family housing.
So as Lieutenant Governor, you're saying you would be an advocate for each of those things and try to draft legislation. What specifically would you do as Lieutenant Governor to achieve the end game that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think it's not only just legislation. I believe it starts with legislation, but to be honest, all the problems that we're talking about right now, legislation exists to address it. Every problem that we see in Rhode Island, there is legislation collecting dust on someone's desk right now that could address that problem. So what we really need is a leader with moral will to do what is necessary. I've proven that in the Senate. I've proven that before I ever got in politics, and that's what I'll do as a lieutenant governor.
Rep. Ruggiero, 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, I think two things. One, and I agree with some of the issues that she's raised. As a freshman senator for the past year or so, she certainly has been very active. We truly need to look at the Medicaid spending. It's important, for people to age at home, as I've mentioned. There has been legislation, but at the same time, just because there's legislation doesn't mean the sponsor has been influential or effective. It does take a leader, and it really takes someone who has relationships. It's more than just submitting a bill, and you can't just proselytize or grandstand. You really have to know how to work with people to get things done. It's what I've done to get an awful lot of legislation over the goal line over the past 14 years. It just doesn't happen. No one does anything alone in government. It's a team sport, so it's all about consensus building. Certainly housing is critical. I supported and was thrilled to be able to vote for the $250 million for affordable housing, which I know the senator did not vote for. But I also believe the affordable housing bills that we had, really important first steps, which I know you didn't vote for, but, that's someone's prerogative. I believe it's important to have the legislation, the policy, and then you couple that with the leadership to actually implement and work with people, because it is about working with a lot of different people.
All right, let's move on. Senator Mendes, are you prepared to serve as governor of Rhode Island, and what separates you from your opponents in this Democratic primary in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. For the reasons I previously stated, I stay connected to my community. I know exactly what pieces of legislation needs to happen in order to address the multiple crises they face. Right now, we don't offer the children in Rhode Island equal quality education. Our education is based on what zip code you live in. And that's a constitutional amendment we can take care of in day one. Massachusetts had decided to interpret their constitution in a way that said every child is guaranteed an equal quality education. And in Rhode Island, we haven't done that. And there are many other really, really fundamental things that we can do on day one. I'm prepared to do that because I know what the needs of Rhode Islanders are.
Rep. Ruggiero, are you prepared to serve as governor?
Yes, absolutely. My experience as a business owner, a small business woman who's running her own advertising management company. I've spent a number of years managing a TV station and certainly in sales, and 14 years as a legislator. So I have developed relationships in the Senate, in the House, and with a number of state agencies, many of those directors coming before me on House Finance, where I served for 8 years. So I understand, the budget and where the pockets of money are. But at the end of the day, it is about just being there for the people. The lieutenant governor serves, works with the governor, but really works for the people of Rhode Island. So I would be ready on day one based on experience and readiness, I think more so than my two opponents.
And, of course, Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos is not here today with us. She was invited. There's a chair with her name written on it if she wants to,
right.
join us right now.
Great visual for radio.
Exactly. Yeah, I can imagine. It's with my signature font, which is pretty illegible. So there's that. That may be the problem. This next section, we're going to do 2-minute answers approximately. We're going to get into some of the key issues that I think everyone would agree are issues that need to be addressed, beginning with housing. And I'll start with Rep. Ruggiero. Housing issues in Rhode Island have impacted a large portion of the state's population. As Lieutenant Governor, specifically, how would you work to reset the housing market, both purchase and rental, to ensure that the state's population as a whole has ample housing? Would this include advocating for certain policies, drafting legislation, so on and so forth? And how would you engage with municipal leaders to accomplish this, where a lot of zoning issues are played out on the local, hyper-local level?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And we've already started that. We did a lot of work last year with affordable housing, and certainly this year in the budget, a number of affordable housing bills passed. And as I mentioned earlier, the $250 million for affordable housing in the budget. We have a shortage of housing, no doubt. There's about 20,000 housing units, that we're missing out on, and we need housing for young professionals and for our older seniors who want to age in place. Last year, we actually created the first ever funding stream for affordable housing, and that's money that's going to cities and towns to use to work on affordable housing. This year, $10 million towards housing for the homeless, because it also have to take care of those who really have no home. And so I worked with a number of advocates, including AARP, for a real important piece of legislation, the accessory dwelling units, okay? Really important. This bill actually loosened up a lot of the municipal requirements in zoning so that a single-family homeowner could add, say, a basement apartment for, a parent. They could do an accessory unit on a garage. So that's really short-term solutions. And then, of course, the long-term solutions for housing is, the money that would be invested over the course of the years. So, yes, absolutely, you work with the advocates. I mean, I've got great relationships with the folks at Rhode Island Housing. You have to work with municipalities. Everyone talks about affordable housing, but then you go to some of these council meetings and everyone says, but not in my backyard, not in my neighborhood. So the ADUs are really important because they're not Airbnb, right? There's a 30-day minimum. So you have access to housing, and that was something that the Senior Agenda Coalition, AARP, so many of the advocates lobbied for. So I think it's just continuing the work that I've been doing with so many nonprofits and, leaders in the Senate and the House.
And those ADUs, auxiliary development units, essentially, you think of a garage space or a separate building on a property, a lot of zoning restrictions regarding that.
Think of Fonzie in Happy Days. I know you're too young for that, but
who's that?
He lived in an ADU. The Cunninghams had an accessory dwelling unit over their garage, and that's where the Fonz lived. So.
Senator Mendes, how would you, as Lieutenant Governor, on a specific level, what would you do to address the housing crisis?
This is near and dear to me. Before I ever got into politics, I was actively serving our unhoused Rhode Islanders. I would work down in Mathewson Street Friendship Breakfast, making sure that hundreds of Rhode Islanders got a dignified meal. But to be clear, that is, we can give our last dollar away and volunteer our last hour away and still never maybe be able to make a dent in the human suffering we're seeing because we do not guarantee housing for all. And so we need to make first the moral statement that in Rhode Island we believe everyone deserves housing. So that's the first thing. And then the actual policies to make that happen are really tangible and easy, and we can do them. First, we should have a rent cap of 4%, rent increase cap of 4%. That means that there should be no major increases in rent over 4%. Right now, we've seen increases up to 24% in some areas. People are literally getting priced out of their homes. I know there are some teachers right now living in their cars. That is unacceptable. So a rent cap. Rent increase cap. Second is building affordable housing. So 10,000 green affordable housing units, which obviously will take time. So we need to do something in the near term as well. That's a long term and that is necessary, but we need to do something immediately. And removing the ban statewide on multiple family housing. So that means if you own a home and you would like to expand on that home and to be able to build an additional living quarters in that home, you should be able to do that. If that should be an option to every Rhode Islander. That is also tremendously helpful for those that are privileged enough to have space to build for their aging parents. That is not an option that's available to all people. And last is making sure that we are fully funding our nonprofits that are housing our unhoused Rhode Islanders and making sure that we actually have a plan for transitional housing so that no one is living on the brink.
All right, thank you very much. Staying with you, Senator Mendes, again, 2 minutes or so on this one. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us about significant gaps in our healthcare system. As Lieutenant Governor, what changes would you seek to make in our insurance, brick and mortar healthcare, and our healthcare response systems here in Rhode Island?
Yeah, this one's also near and dear to me because I worked in healthcare. And I'm also running alongside healthcare workers. Right now, there are nurses and teachers right now, and healthcare workers, CNA is running for office right now. I also lost my dad in COVID, and so in a healthcare facility. So this one's really tough. There are a couple of really important things. In the height of COVID, we saw the CEOs of healthcare insurance companies making record profits, banking on our suffering. So I would love to see a cap on CEO pay and a ceiling on that pay. I think that the next thing that we should do is we should increase our Medicaid reimbursement rates. Right now in Rhode Island, we have according to Kids Count report, we have over 126 1,000 children on Right Smiles, so state-funded dental. But because we haven't increased the rates, the reimbursement rates, there are less than 19 dentists available that will take that. And most of them are capped and cannot see more patients. So I have a dental clinic down in Pawtucket that are Blackstone Valley Clinic that are seeing these children. And do you know what's happening? They're pulling out multiple rotten teeth at a time. Because these children cannot get to the dentist and get the health care that they need. That is criminal. It's actually heartbreaking. And so how can these children learn in school? How can they study when they're actually in pain? And there's no reason for it. And I actually, it's nice to talk about solutions, but my opponent has, one of my opponents, Rep. Ruggiero, the one that showed up, thank you, by the way, sits on the finance committee. And what is the reason for this many years for the House to not propose the increase on Medicaid reimbursement rates? Why do we see children suffering and not being able to see a dentist in the state of Rhode Island? Foster children, children on Medicaid, Right Smiles. It's unbelievable.
Rep. Ruggiero.
First, I want to say I'm sorry about the loss of your father.
Thank you.
I cannot imagine that. I have the fortune of still having my parents, and how blessed am I at this hour of my life. We certainly have looked at, and we have to look at Medicaid reimbursement and absolutely doing rate reform. As a matter of fact, OHIC, the Office of Health Insurance Commissioner, is doing that. It was part of what was established, so that's underway. To answer your question, Bill, the emerging from COVID, I think there were three things, okay? One is increased mental health services, because a lot of people had an awful lot of anxiety and depression. The second is making sure we increase our senior services. And the third is making sure we help small businesses. People were hit hard by this pandemic, okay? I mentioned anxiety, depression, mental health suffered. I was instrumental in getting $85 million in our budget so that we could increase mental health services and also pay the community service providers. Many of these folks have not seen an increase in a decade, and that's really important. We need more funding, and we're underway with that with community mental health centers. Also in schools, because so many, the student suicide rate is just beyond the pale. And then many small businesses didn't survive the pandemic. So those that have, we have to make sure we keep them to thrive and not just survive. And then finally, our seniors were hit the hardest. The senior centers were the hub for all of these services. How do I know? Because every Monday morning, I would drive to Meals on Wheels and pick up meals from my senior centers and then deliver it to them so they could distribute throughout the community. And many of these older Rhode Islanders literally were home. There was no socialization. So I see the aging policies and the senior services really fragmented in our state. All of this is under the purview of the Lieutenant Governor's office. Mm-hmm. That is the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. And it just infuriates me that we haven't seen legislation or policy in over a decade. Our parents deserve more. Our grandparents deserve more. And even though you're pretty young and you won't need senior services, someone in your family may. And quite honestly, so many folks are part of that sandwich generation, right? Where they're taking care of their kids, they're trying to figure out how do we pay for college, and then all of a sudden they have an aging parent. And they don't know the resources. They don't know what's available on this continuum of care. And that education, and to me, that is something I want to see in the Lieutenant Governor's office, where we used to have a booklet on senior services so that people knew where to go for resources. Haven't seen that since 2017. Need to bring that back as well.
All right, on this next question, looking for about a 20-second answer, pretty quick,
okay.
if you will. We'll start with you, Rep. Rhode Island's Constitution provides for shoreline access that, through recent and historical examples, has often been thwarted by private development. As Lieutenant Governor, how would you ensure Rhode Islanders have access to the shore?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I was a co-sponsor of the Shoreline Access Bill, so I understand it. My colleague, Rep. Courtvan, ran the study commission, and it is important. As I like to say, no one owns the ocean, okay? And what we have, and it's in our state constitution, what needed to be determined is, do you have 6 feet, which is where we settled. It did not pass the Senate. It's a shame that my opponent, Senator Mendes, couldn't get the Senate president to move the bill. But it is, as I said, about influence. But we passed it in the House. And you don't get to stop. I mean, you just walk along the access, and everyone is entitled to that.
Yeah, I agree that everyone is entitled to that. I don't think the bill went far enough. I do think I would have loved to see something closer to what Hawaii has. So it's the entire shoreline up to the vegetation line, and that everyone is has access to our shoreline. I also think this is important for the first people of Rhode Island, for our indigenous folks. It is really, really insulting that it is such a burden and barrier to get to our shoreline, to access what is tremendously central part of our culture. And so that is problematic, but it's also indicative of the very gatekeeping, elitist kind of leadership that we've seen, both from the Senate president and the speaker, as well as our current governor. They're really too busy spending time with developers and corporate leaders and CEOs to really pay attention to the fact that Rhode Islanders who are doing their best to pay their taxes and keep a roof over their families' heads can't even enjoy the beautiful shore and the beautiful shoreline that we have to offer. And it's wrong.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Okay, this next question, about 2 minutes or so on this. This is a topic that we could probably do an entire forum on between all of us here. Tidewater Landing. It's a project that will, using significant private investment along with about $60 million in combined Pawtucket and state taxpayer dollars, create a soccer stadium in Pawtucket along with a scheduled auxiliary development. Mm-hmm. We begin with Senator Mendes. Mm-hmm. Pawtucket is part of your representative zone, so to speak, your district.
Yes, very proud of that.
Are you in favor of the project via its current funding formula? And are you confident that, given Rhode Island's basic needs challenges, that investing in an entertainment facility, specifically soccer, is going to provide the generative results that the developer and the advocates for this project promise?
No. This is a perfect example of Governor McKee particularly, but the leaders of the state having their priorities wrong. I think that I'm very excited that that there's opportunity for Pawtucket. I also would like that the developers that come in and create a plan and offer a stadium and offer housing should be able to do it without taxpayer money and without $60 million of our money, particularly when I know how hard a lot of my constituents in Pawtucket are suffering, and would love to see that investment in their schools and in their sidewalks and in their parks and in various other areas. And so, yeah. I think that this is a perfect example of who they're chummy with and what deals they end up prioritizing and who they forget about. And far too often it's everyday Rhode Islanders.
Thank you, Bill. Pawtucket needs to become a vibrant economic destination, okay? I believe there's a lot more that's going to happen with this deal. This is just the beginning. It's not over yet. We need oversight. I talked about that before. We got to really pay attention to the amount of money that's being spent, but also how many jobs? What does the housing look like? The few things I've learned from this entire package is some things that really safeguard the taxpayer. You know, unlike 38 studios, no money is put up front. That was a bad mistake. So money is allocated as the project goes along. The other thing that's really important is the taxpayer is not on the hook for any cost overruns. The developers are on the hook for that. And finally, the team has to stay for 30 years in Rhode Island. Now, why does that matter? Because if you look at St. Louis, what happened in St. Louis, they paid for a stadium, and 5 years later, the Rams left. And so St. Louis is still paying for that stadium. So fortunately, there are some safeguards in this to help the taxpayers, but it needs to be a lot more. I mean, I worked on the legislation for the tax incremental financing. That's critical for this to become an economic boon for Pawtucket and also for the state of Rhode Island. So we need the Riverwalk. We need the affordable housing. We need the retail. So there is so much more that we're going to see next legislative session on this project. I think this jury is still out on this.
You mentioned the TIF, and for 30 seconds here, let's keep on that discussion. What about the driver of this whole project, soccer? People going to show up for this thing? Is that, I mean, you have this TIF, but if you don't bring the correct amount of people out on a regular basis to a soccer game in the USL, minor league soccer, does this project have any viability?
You know, that's an interesting question. I've thought about that. And I didn't realize that this area, Rhode Island, is one of the top 10 markets for soccer in the nation. So that was interesting to learn. The second thing, and this is just anecdotal, a lot of parents don't want their sons playing, or daughters, in football. So soccer is something that is, European football, and you don't have to wear the pads, and you're probably not going to get seriously injured or have a lot of the brain injuries that we're learning about, with the concussions and what's happening with football. So I believe there's probably more of a market. I know if I had a young son or daughter, I would say, soccer, cool, run up and down that field. That's great exercise.
Yeah, a report recently came out, and I wish I had it in front of me, that I believe the governor was reluctant to kind of reveal, that talked about the viability, actually. And it wasn't very attractive. It looked a little risky to a lot of people, which is why they didn't want to release that report. And the second thing is, when something is really sold as, going to be the golden ticket for a community, but that the community needs to be kind of on the hook with these $1 million developers, it causes me pause. It causes me even more pause when those developers donate to campaigns. They've donated to Governor McKee. I believe they've donated to the current lieutenant governor. I know the current lieutenant governor, Sabina Matos, has taken money from a lot of developers over her time. So it's not a surprise to me that a little bit of a risky, viable deal that taxpayers are on the hook for gets this kind of green light, and it's problematic.
All right. Oh, pardon me.
Bill, I just want to mention, because I don't know if someone's tuning in a little bit later to your program, and thank you for having this forum. It's really important. It's part of our democratic process. So, voters know what candidates stand for. And again, it is really disappointing that Lieutenant Governor Matos is missing in action and will not debate. She says she just doesn't have the time. And that's too bad, because the voters deserve to know where people stand on the issues. So as a lieutenant governor, I intend to be very accessible and active and will not run away from any conversation.
All right, staying with you, Rep, on, without question, one of the hot button issues of, I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it or frame it, but...
well, you just did.
Well, there it is. Too late.
It's already out
We're
there.
not going backwards. We're not erasing anything.
Can't put the
Okay,
toothpaste back in the tube, Bill.
One of the hot button issues of our time right now is abortion. No question about it. Let's kind of keep this as concise as possible, because,
Sure.
again, it's one of those things we could go on for a long time. What concrete steps would you take as lieutenant governor to ensure abortion access for all Rhode Islanders?
Right. I am, absolutely adamant about a woman's reproductive right choice. And I have been a staunch supporter for decades, even before my opponent became, a state senator. Ooh.
Well, we have an aunt in here. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Aunt. Anyway, I have been defending women's reproductive rights for decades, and I was a co-sponsor of the Reproductive Privacy Act in Rhode Island in 2019, which is our backstop to ensure that women have access to their reproductive choice and health care. Back in 2019, on the floor, the House floor, so many people said, don't worry about this. Roe v. Wade is a constitutional right, and guess what? The U.S. Supreme Court, the Dobbs decision, things were just upended. 6 people on that U.S. Supreme Court have upended millions, hundreds of millions of lives of women and men in this country. Don't think it's not affecting men. It is changing their lives big time. So as lieutenant governor, I plan to work with the governor, whomever the people of Rhode Island elect as the next governor, to ensure that we put that in the budget. It should have been in the budget last year. But now that we have this decision, everyone is galvanized, people are educated on it, and I believe and will work very strongly on that. Also, my biggest fear is what happens in November with the federal elections, because it's just going to take Congress to eviscerate all of the work that 16 states, including Rhode Island, have done to safeguard access to safe, affordable health care and abortion.
Senator?
Yeah, this is really near and dear to me, because this is part of my evolution and process. I grew up in a conservative household. A lot of people know that about me, and part of really leaning in and growing as a strong feminist and advocate was to kind of learn about reproductive rights. And thank you, Rep, for fighting for that, the RPA. The Equality and Abortion Care Act, the reason why that's so important is because it's basically deciding who gets access to abortion. Right now in the state, We have codified that abortion is legal, and we've protected that. However, there's still a ban right now for those that work in government, that work for Rhode Island, and that get state-covered insurance or Medicaid. And that is a problem. That means that someone that works for the state of Rhode Island, or a low-income woman that is vulnerable, or person that is vulnerable right now, will not have access to health care, fundamental health care, which is abortion. And abortion is health care. And so it hits me at my core, because everything that I'm running on and everything that I stand for is equality. And so when we decide housing for some, healthcare for some, tax breaks for some, which, by the way, is always usually the buddies of the people running the state, that's a problem. And so every single item that I'm fighting for, including abortion, it is not complete until everyone gets it.
I just want to add one thing, and that is that I'm grateful that Senator Mendes, the freshman senator, has come around in the last year to recognize how important this access is, because for many, many years she was an anti-abortion with many memes on social media. In many ways, that kind of behavior has brought us to this place with the Dobbs decision. So I believe now women are galvanized and realizing that, government shouldn't be in our bedrooms, and we have the right to make decisions on our reproductive health.
I'd love to just share a little bit about that. It wasn't a year ago; it was it was about a decade ago, and I was very vocal while in the Senate. To be really clear, one of the things that before I got into politics, which was never the plan for me, I was a regular Rhode Islander, looking out for other Rhode Islanders, volunteering my time, had zero plans in being in politics. But I had the opportunity, which a lot of people don't have, to go back to college as an adult. Took sociology classes, was able to read and understand reproductive rights, had incredible professors that were able to invest in me, be gracious in that process. And I think that's very important if we're going to create a movement, is to be able to understand that. Also, like I said, I had mentored young women. One of people had asked me, what point did you kind of change your mind? And it was multiple points. It was that investment from professors. There was also a time I mentored young women. And there was one woman that I mentored. She was actually at URI and had called me, and I knew her and her roommates, and she had called me because her roommate had been date raped. And I was there to direct them to a counselor, to report, to do all of these things, because this was my job, to be a mentor. And the first thing, after getting them to the health, Plan B. Let's get you Plan B. Let's get you to a clinic. Let's take care of you. And one of my faith leaders became very upset at me because I handled it that way. And so in very anti-choice spaces, I went toe-to-toe with faith leaders about a woman's rights in those spaces. But because of my process of learning and understanding in very pro-choice spaces, I wasn't as vocal because I was still learning, and I wanted leaders to be able to be vocal on that. So I think the only way we're going to be able to get change is to understand a lot of Rhode Islanders grew up Christian and Catholic and are going to have a process, and we're going to have to be able to bring those people along. And when you have power, then you have to use it the right way.
Just very quickly to establish the timeline, you say it was a year ago that the senator...
That's what, when we were on the WPRI debate, I thought they had said a year and a half ago you changed your position.
No. It was a decade ago. And the post that you saw was actually I think it was about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. But those were the posts. And that was actually right around the time that I was going toe-to-toe with a faith leader because I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I knew, okay, something's wrong here.
What's important, though, is that she's come around. And I'm grateful that she has come around because it's important that we protect women's reproductive freedom. It's something I have been fighting for decades, and my record certainly, stands on that. It is so important, and I would continue to do that as lieutenant governor. It's critical. It's an important office. As I said, you work with the governor, but you work for the people. And it's about being a consensus builder, right? It's not, throwing bombs or trying to be diversionary. It is about bringing people together and creating solutions. I see the lieutenant governor's office almost as an ombudsman, where you listen to the problems that people bring, you convene the stakeholders, and then it's important to write legislation. Why do I say that? Well, because Rep. Ruggiero, that's what she does, right? You write legislation. That's how you create policy. Policy is how you change people's lives, and that's how you get measurable results.
The last thing on that is the policy exists. So we don't need more policy. We need leaders that will be able to do it.
Oh, I'm not talking generally about policy.
On this particular issue, on the EACA, this policy exists, and also the current lieutenant governor could have simply. Yeah. This is the three. Could have simply put out a statement and said, "I would like to see the Equality and Abortion Care Act come to the floor," and send that to the Speaker and the Senate President. Make it a priority. Make a stance. What's the point of having power if you don't use it for people?
Well, and unfortunately, with our current lieutenant governor, she is echoing much of what the governor is doing as a shadow. As I said before, this is an independent office. So it's really important that you understand that the lieutenant governor's office has statutory responsibilities. Yeah. And we have not seen any legislation or policy come out in over a decade. It's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. It's what I've been doing for 14 years as a state legislator. And quite honestly, I don't believe our older citizens can wait another 4 years. Now, I am ready on day one to begin putting this office to work.
All right, in this next section here, we are rapidly approaching the conclusion of this debate. So I want to... I know,
How is that possible?
Exactly. All right, at the intermission here, enjoy the halftime entertainment.
Maybe it's good that it was only two of us.
Yeah, that's right.
I know, we wouldn't have had to get all this information in. So.
Yeah, once again, for those of you joining us, Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos declined our invitation to participate today in spite of efforts again last night to try to... get her in here. She has declined. All right, so we're looking for like one-word answers here. Miss Mendes, you and Matt Brown, who is ostensibly your running mate, have called for a whole new government. Name one thing you'd keep about our current government.
That's a really great question. The RPA. I love the some of the instrumental. Are you talking about policies?
I'm talking about personnel, and as I understand it, you're calling for all new people, all new,
in the legislature. Yeah.
Well, a whole new. You call for a whole new government.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that means Director Peter Alviti, the Department of Transportation, he's gone. Mm-hmm. Whoever paves the lines on or colors the line on the Newport Bridge, they're gone. If you're calling for a whole new government, so name one thing that you keep.
All of those people. I think it's the legislatures, it's the Senate President, Speaker of the House. Those are the people that need to go from the top. But the people that are holding it together are very much those people, and I'd love to see them respected and cared for, and actually watch them run for office themselves.
Rep. Ruggiero, you put out a statement yesterday that was critical.
Can I just answer that question?
Please, of course.
And then I'll go to yours, because I think it's really important that the one thing we keep in our legislative process is public input. The ability for people in the public to come in and testify on bills, whether it's verbally in committee or it's written. That input is so critical. It's how we make bills better. Every bill that is on the calendar on the House floor is what's called a sub-A, amended, because it got better with public input.
Understood.
Sorry.
No problem at all, please. That's the nature of the beast here. Rep. Ruggiero, you put out a statement yesterday critical of Lieutenant Governor Matos' absence at this, and as I understand, other debates as well, in which you referenced the McKee-Matos administration. It's interesting because Speaker Shekarchi has endorsed you and also Governor McKee. So framing the McKee-Matos administration, do you see the entirety of that administration, as you describe it, as a failed operation?
A couple of thoughts. One, there are 5 people running against him, so that says something in and of itself. And in the last debate on WPRI, Sabina could not give Governor McKee a grade. So it's interesting because here's the man who gave her the position of lieutenant governor, and you can't give him an A. So I found that to be surprisingly, a surprising indictment. Second of all, I think that the McKee-Matos administration, I know, is under federal investigation. Okay, the FBI and the U.S. Attorney are looking at the ILO education contract. There are subpoenas who have been issued and radio silence.
Yeah, that at least according to WPRI and the Boston Globe.
That's correct. And then finally, I would play to, they are dragging in their own polls. We are less than 5 weeks away from this election on September 13th, the primary. And already there are 30% undecided in the governor's race, 44% undecided in the lieutenant governor's race. And these are the incumbents, or quasi-incumbents, right? They're about as incumbent as one can get, considering that they, were not elected to their positions. So I think there's a lot around that, and that is the reason for the statement.
Okay, looking for a one-word answer here, Rep. Beginning with you. Should we maintain, defund, or increase funding for the police, or abolish police altogether?
I don't believe in defunding. I believe in diversifying.
Yes, I believe that we should have police accountability and that we should repeal Leobor.
No, as far as defund, increase, abolish?
Actually, all of those, the funding comes from the municipalities, so the state doesn't, kind of determine those anyway. But what we can do is repeal Leobor and make sure that police are held accountable just the way that you and I are.
Yes or no answer. Should we have school resource officers in schools?
No.
No.
Rep. Ruggiero, who's the lieutenant governor or the previous Rhode Island lieutenant governor that you most admire?
I'm going to use this to say 3.
Whoa.
We owe a debt of gratitude to Lieutenant Governor Elizabeth Roberts, a former legislator, for framing the healthcare system that we have, Health Source Rhode Island, in Rhode Island. Her office worked tirelessly, and we were a decade ahead of other states. Also, Richard Leach, the very first lieutenant governor, because as you know, the lieutenant governor used to preside over the Senate, and he put in a lot of the framework statutorily for what we have today. And I got to give a shout out to Lieutenant Governor Charlie Fogarty, also a legislator, right, who did a lot of work with the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council. He tells me the last time they saw a package of bills was in 2007 when he was lieutenant governor. So this is a really important position, and hats off to them, and I look forward to working in their steps as the next lieutenant governor.
The lieutenant governor, previous Rhode Island lieutenant governor that you most admire?
That's a really great question. I think the rep has named 3 really great, instrumental kind of people that have changed the game regarding being a lieutenant governor, but to be honest, one of the things that I really don't like about politics is this how there's like this patting of the back and ticker tape parade, and everyone likes to celebrate each other. There's bill signings and it just tons of parties and kind of really, it's very egocentric. And so I really spend my time kind of celebrating the unsung heroes in Rhode Island, the nurses and the teachers and the tradespeople. I'm really grateful for everyone that ran and served as a lieutenant governor and what they may or may not have done. But I don't know anyone in Rhode Island that said their life was completely different because of some incredible person that was in lieutenant governor.
But is there anyone who'd call, let's say, for advice,
we all
as a mentor?
We all care about
Yes,
nurses and teachers.
there's totally people I would call for advice, but there's just not anyone that is currently a lieutenant governor.
Well,
I would
a
call
previous lieutenant governor.
No.
You would not seek the advice of a previous lieutenant governor?
I would call, if I needed advice, I'd call Senator Culkin, I'll call Lenny Seo, I would call Matt Brown. I don't think there's anyone previously as the lieutenant governor that I would call for advice. I don't have that relationship with them either.
Staying with you, Senator, would you accept President Biden's endorsement?
Absolutely.
Sure, if he knew me.
Maybe I'll be here. We'll have
great.
Invite him to dinner.
All right. We're about to hit our
Tell him
closing.
there's an empty seat here.
That's right. We've got an empty seat. The lieutenant governor of Rhode Island's not here.
He could go.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. So two more of these quick ones, and we'll get to closing statements. Again, thank you each for being here. Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos declined our invitation, is not here. There's an empty chair with a handwritten sign with her name on it. Should she decide to join us for closing statements, if she can somehow hear my voice through these soundproof walls.
I bet you it doesn't happen.
I'm pretty sure she's not going to be here. It is what it is. Okay, so Rep. Ruggiero, does Rhode Island's media serve as an accurate mirror for the key issues that impact most of our community?
That's a tough one, having been a former reporter and broadcaster. So I have great respect for the media and the Fourth Estate. So, yes.
Yeah, it's a big yes for me. I saw that firsthand during the sleep out protest in the winter when I was sleeping outside and with hundreds of people protesting the lack of housing for our unhoused Rhode Islanders. And the people that showed up, in addition to community members and housing advocates, reporters, out in the cold, out in the wind, would show up, were really, really invested in making sure that story got out. And I could see firsthand the tireless work that went into producing well-informed stories so that Rhode Islanders knew what was happening.
All right. There's a lot that we didn't cover today, education, so on and so forth. I want to ask this last question before we do our closing statements. And of course, education is incredibly critical. So if you want to work that into your closing statement, I just don't want to drag this on any longer because I know where
you
this is going to go.
You did a good job, though. This was great.
This is a blast.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, that's relieving. That's great to hear.
You should get your own show.
Hey, anybody listening at WPRO? Hopefully, we'll see. So, the Port of Providence. Let's be honest about it. That there are proven environmental what could be described as the results of environmental racism, negative health outcomes, so on and so forth. As Lieutenant Governor, Rep. Ruggiero, would you seek to close down the Port of Providence and at least the pollutants that it creates?
Right. One of the things that's really important is that we've got to move away, and thankfully I think Port of Providence is trying to do more staging for wind energy. We've got to get away from the fossil fuels, from the pollution, from the the environmental injustice, if you will, that's happening there. And we need to really poise ourselves for the industries that are going to make a difference. People know my stand with renewable energy, and as an environmentalist, we need to really look at getting away from fossil fuels, and certainly that would be something that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I'm really proud to be running on a Green New Deal, and that includes expanding solar to all Rhode Islanders. It includes wind energy, but it also includes shutting down the fossil fuel industry. And I think that's an important distinction between myself and my opponents, is because I don't think that we can or should pursue renewable energies while leaving our poorest Rhode Islanders, our Black and brown communities, to suffer the burden of the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry is not just this benign, just silent actor in Rhode Island. They heavily fund campaigns. They donate to campaigns. The C3 lobbyist, Nick Hammond, donated to current Lieutenant Governor Matos. And so how can we protect Rhode Islanders? Right now we have the highest asthma rates for children in the Port of Providence. Those are our poorest children. And so we, I think it's an indictment on our leaders that we've looked the other way while children suffer. So we got to do renewable energy, but we can't leave our poorest people behind and let them suffer, and literally lead in the water, lead in the pipes, and unbreathable air. It's wrong.
All right. So we are now at the point of our closing statements here, which are set to be about 2 minutes. Senator Mendes won the coin toss at the beginning of our presentation today and chose to close out. So that means that Rep. Ruggiero, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement here on the Bartholomew Town WPRO debate series.
Got those call letters in. Nice job. Thank you, Bill, so much. It's an honor to be here. I am disappointed that Lieutenant Governor Matos is missing in action and would not debate, saying she's too busy to talk to voters. That's wrong. As Lieutenant Governor, I will make that a priority. I intend to be the most accessible and active Lieutenant Governor. The office of Lieutenant Governor has so much potential. It just needs the right leadership. I put ideas into action. I talked about some of that, what I've done my whole career, as a small business owner and certainly as a 14-year legislator. As your Lieutenant Governor, I'll convene the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council, creating policy so those 60-plus can actually age in place, something that our parents and grandparents deserve. We'll look at the Medicaid because we're ranked 42nd in the nation, 42nd. In aging in place at home. We can do much better than that. We need to do more for our small businesses. I always say that Rhode Island's largest business is small business. So I'll be a Lieutenant Governor that will write legislation and serve as a bridge between the state legislature and the office of the governor, okay? It's important that we get more from that office. I understand how the legislature works, if you can understand how the legislature works, right? Having been there 14 years with my relationships, that matters. So I will work with whomever the people of Rhode Island elect as the next governor of Rhode Island. I will work with that governor, but I will also make sure this independent office of Lieutenant Governor actually does something for the people, because you work for the people. Readiness matters, experience matters, and I'm ready on day one, so I respectfully ask the listeners for your vote on September 13th to be your next Lieutenant Governor. And the website, debruggiero.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rep. And Senator Mendes, your closing statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Bill. It's really an honor to be here and to share why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. As I said before, I never planned to be in politics. I never planned to run for office. I grew up in a home that deeply taught that you fight for the people everyone else forgot about. I watched my parents do that. As a Cape Verdean and Puerto Rican Rhode Islander, I watched my ancestors do that. I know that I have a legacy of that. And I don't think that the people leading our state are doing that. I don't think they're looking out for all Rhode Islanders. And that was what got me to run the first time, and won in a massive win against the Senate Finance Chair. And what that told me was that people in East Providence and people in Pawtucket really needed someone who was going to fight for them, that wasn't going to just play the political game. And so when I got into the State House and watched that as we did not increase Medicaid reimbursement rates, I watched the leaders of the state refuse to offer every child in Rhode Island equal quality education. I watched them turn the other way to protect the people in the Port of Providence. I decided that I was very excited to run for lieutenant governor, but I wasn't going to do it alone, because the only way we're going to get change is together, and I was going to do it with the people that I knew were invested in those very issues. So that's why I'm running with Matt Brown for governor. That's why I'm running with a slate of candidates for the General Assembly, people like Lenny Seo and Mel DuPont and Andrew Poyant and many other people in all across the state of Rhode Islanders that are environmental scientists, nurses, teachers, social workers like Clara Hardy. Because I know with them, with a new administration, with a new government, a whole new government of Democratic leaders that actually will fight for democratic values, that we can get equal quality education for all children, that we can get a $19 minimum wage, that we can get a Green New Deal that doesn't leave anyone behind, and that we can get Medicare for all, and that we can actually have a healthcare system, an education system, and an economy that includes all Rhode Islanders. That's what I'll fight for. I humbly ask that the listeners vote for me September 13th. I humbly ask for their vote, and I'm really, really honored to serve in the Senate and be excited to do that as Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Senator Mendes. I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, but Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos was invited to participate in this debate forum and declined it. So I just want to make sure I had a chance to include that.
Thank you for doing this. This is really important. I think voters need to understand the issues, what the Lieutenant Governor currently has not been doing, and what the Lieutenant Governor going forward really needs to do for the people of Rhode Island.
Yeah, what we've done and what we're willing to do is really important, and answering your questions and being direct is really important. So I appreciate the questions that you asked and giving us so much time to do it too.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
And thank you to WPRO.
Yes.
Absolutely. And thank you, Senator. Thank you, Rep. And thank you to the listeners. This is the Bartholomew Town WPRO debate series. Stay tuned for our upcoming debates. General Treasurer of Rhode Island, Governor of Rhode Island, Congressional District 2, Mayor of Providence, all ahead here in this debate series. I'm Bill Bartholomew. For everyone here at WPRO and Bartholomew Town, have a great afternoon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.